My name is Virginia, and I think everybody knows that I am regularly doing videos about my worry for the Church of England and the lack of priests, very particularly in rural areas. If you don't have a priest, the whole thing starts to collapse. The very simple reason that people are not going to go to church unless they feel they're going to meet somebody who they know, who pastorally looks after them and cares about them and runs really what the church should be, the local hub where people come to meet, pray, have coffee afterwards and get together. Now, if there's no priest or a very rushed priest because he's got too much work to do, or in an instance where there's an interregnum, you have a priest that has probably retired and is not regularly in that church, the congregation actually will shrink. And it has been proved, there have been a number of articles in the Church Times about how it's not that people don't want to go to church, it's that if there aren't services and if they're not properly run by a priest, there's a very good chance nobody's going to turn up. And what does that really mean? Actually, it means something pretty devastating. There are immediately, if there aren't people there or reduced a number of people, the following things immediately get reduced. There are no collections or less collections. There are no covenants, no legacies. And so the financial side of the thing collapses, and that in turn the church will say, well, we haven't got any money, so we can't pay for a priest. So you have just completely got the thing the wrong way up. You've got to look after the customers, look after them with a good priest, and then you'll get the money in. If it continues, and I think it is very worrying, because on the Save the Parish website, it certainly looks as if it's pretty deliberate that the hierarchy of the Church of England are actually not looking after rural parishes very particularly, and that these communities will slowly fold, and then you're left. What are you left with? That's the serious part. You're left with a grade 1 or grade 2, particularly in the lovely villages throughout England, buildings which are going to cost the church a fortune to insure against public liability. So these sad monuments could actually become a rather frightening liability, which the church will have to insure and look after. Okay, you may say, well, some of them could become desirable residences. That's much more difficult with grade listed buildings for starters. Secondly, oh, brilliant, I hope the church remember to advertise this bit. You get free bone meal in your garden, which is extremely good for the roses. But is it quite the right bone meal that you really want? So it's a complete disruption of what the whole of England is actually sewn together by what we call the Church of England. Because of the lack of priests, and because the church has not been training enough replacements, there is a dearth of priests, particularly in rural areas. And when there is an interregnum, I have certainly noticed that the situation is much more serious than it used to be. Of course, there will always be interregnums because a priest will retire or he will go on to another job and a replacement has to be found. It's the same in a business, isn't it? You have to find the replacement. Previously in interregnums, there used to be 2 or 3 people who come forward. The church advertises the vacancy, and then people will come forward, priests will come forward to fill that vacancy, and the church wardens would then interview them and make their selection. What is a lot more serious now is that actually those priests are not coming forward. And in a particular instance, much nearer to home, which is actually happening, we have got an interregnum, and the church have advertised that vacancy and nobody has come forward. I think there was one person who came and sort of sniffed around. It's a House for Duty post, and they soon went away because House for Duty posts are completely and utterly hopeless. No one can afford to take them on. Okay, you get a house for free, but you have to pay obviously the outgoings. But because the priests now have such large parishes, they have to rush around everywhere to try and keep it going, keep everything going. And the idea of a house for duty priest is that they give the church, I think I may get my figures or my dates wrong, times wrong, but 4 days they have to give to the church, and the rest of the time they can go and do another job. Well, I can tell you they haven't got any time to go and do another job because of the many parishes, that the churches that they have to look after. There's no time. Very often they probably have a wife or a partner who does go out to work and brings in money, but I can imagine how resentful she might feel, having gone out to work, come back home to spend some time with her husband, who's a vicar, and he's rushing out the door because he's got so much work to do, and he can't find another job because he hasn't got the time to go out there and earn the money. So the whole thing of a house for duty is complete and utter now. For changed times, it might have worked when it was first thought of. It now simply does not work. And in this instance where the church has advertised this vacancy, they had one person, as I've just said, who came around and had a look and didn't want the job. And now they've got no replies at all. They need to look at that to realise why that's not happening. And what is even more astonishing is that they don't advertise it regularly. They advertise it and then they stop for a month or two, and then they advertise the vacancy again. Now, I was in business for years, and if you had a vacancy in your business, you would advertise it continually. And if you didn't get any replies, or you didn't get the right replies, you didn't say, well, that's their fault. It was your fault. So you would look again very carefully at the job description to see what it was you were advertising. And if you weren't getting any replies, there's something wrong with the job description. And so that's what I'm saying to the Church of England. House for duty, these job descriptions don't work. Actually, in the diocese that I'm talking about, there are 10 vacancies. So please, can the Church of England not look to see what it is they're advertising? And if it's house for duty, nobody wants those jobs anymore, so they have to change it. And I've said for many, many years, if you don't pay people properly, they're not going to apply for a job. And these jobs as house for duty just are too expensive, and the parishes, as I've said, are far too big, and so it's not surprising that nobody wants them. So what's left is us sitting on hard pews, listening to various priests who actually, I have to say, they are retired, but they are all lovely people. And one of them the other day just said to me, "God bless you." And I thought, that's so nice. And they're all retiring. So why haven't they been replaced with people equally lovely ideas of saying God bless you? But it made me realise that actually the priest is so important. Pastoral care is so important. And today, with these huge, far-flung churches, they can't do the pastoral care. That doesn't happen. So the church really has, very, very sadly, in my own opinion, done a huge amount of damage. So let's just get back to what eventually is going to be left. There are going to be these monuments which are crumbling, and in every town, village, city, what is the focal point? It's a church, isn't it? And so you have this monument to Christianity which has faded because the church haven't looked after their priests, who in turn look after parishioners, who in turn look after what the needs are of the people and give pastoral care. This is some of a joke, isn't it? In my day, and I'm well into my 80s now, we used to have a priest who would call around and come and have a cup of tea with you. That doesn't exist anymore, because literally there's no time for it. Okay, your answer might be, but everybody's busy, they're out to work, who's got time for a priest to come around and have a cup of tea? But actually, maybe not on that sort of basis, but then you have the stations of life when people are getting married, or they're having a baby christened, or their loved ones are dying. It's very nice to have a priest giving some pastoral care when those events are happening. I'm sure that they do, but they're very stretched. And I have also read that many of these priests are so exhausted, they certainly can't continue. So if you're advertising a job where it'll exhaust you in a very short space of time, where your children probably hardly see you because as a priest you're rushing out the door dealing with everything, I think the church has got to think very seriously about what they are actually doing, and if they're not really destroying a lot of what our parishes were set up for.